talk about the final two episodes of the Marvel Studios and Disney Plus original series, Agatha All Along. Episodes 8 and 9 just premiered. And as I mentioned, this is wrapping up this apparently limited series on Disney Plus. Episode 8 is entitled Follow Me, My Friend, to Glory at the End. And episode 9 is entitled Mate and Mother Crone. And this is a bit unusual because traditionally these Marvel Disney Plus shows, they would release typically about 2 episodes at the premiere and then just finish out with an episode per week. But now they've decided to release both episodes simultaneously as the premiere, likely to get this out the door before the Halloween season were to pass, because this is closely associated with the Halloween and fall season. But as a package, we're going to talk about these 2 episodes today and get into the spoilers and everything that went down as we start to reflect on how this series worked for us in the grand scheme of things. But before we do that, we'll just start off with our general big picture thoughts. And again, I think we'll talk about these together and just kind of start there and dive in to all of the other things as we progress throughout the episode. But ultimately, what did you think about these final 2 episodes of Agatha All Along?
Following, I think, episode 7 and what that episode was, I was excited to see what episode 8 and 9 provided and see how, of course, the show, how it landed. I was very curious. I think I was, pretty high about that episode. And coming into episode 8 and 9, I was like, okay, what are we going to do different? How are we going to land this plane? And I think overall it was okay, but I will say the last 2 episodes were disappointing for me. Overall, I think I expected, I don't know. Episode 8 in particular was an episode that felt very tonally confusing for me. I feel like we were all over the place. We kept pushing and pulling a lot of ways I think I was supposed to feel, not in like the good way, like, oh, a whirlwind of emotions. It was just like, was that supposed to be, I don't know, was that supposed to be funny? Was that supposed to be campy? Was this supposed to be, there's like a serious moment and fighting moments, and I don't know. It just, there was too much kind of happening, I think, for me to try to figure out what I'm supposed to be looking at in episode 8. Episode 9 in particular, I will say, I do like it a little bit more. I still, I think, feel some weird ways about the ending. I'm still in a mixed bag on that front, but I think I do like episode 9 better than I did like episode 8. And overall, it landed okay, but still disappointed by the end of it all. I think I expected a little more. I was hoping for a little more. I can't even say expected completely, because I think I always hold how I feel about these Disney Plus shows, only to a certain degree. And I think by the end of it, it turned out just to be okay for me. A lot of good things in there, but I just don't feel like we focused in places that we needed to focus. Performances were still good. I still like a lot of the set design. I still like a lot of the way some of these things look. But overall, just disappointing.
So I'm a bit of the opposite. I actually like episode 8 better than 9, but I would also agree that this is just a really uneven final 2 episodes comparatively, I think, with the rest of the show. And I have lots of thoughts and questions specifically about how 9 ends. And I think maybe the motivation or the intentionality behind it, or what may come next. It certainly left me not in a state of confusion, but it left me certainly feeling somewhat empty by the end of it. But there are other things and other, I think, attributes and highlights for this show that do really work for me, that were executed in 9, even though I like that episode a little bit less. There were some ideas that I'm like, okay, I love that they kind of stuck to what I imagined and what I hoped that they would stick to. But episode 8 was just a little bit tighter, a little bit more focused to me. And so I did enjoy that one better, but it's still not perfect. It certainly has its flaws as well, but we're going to get into it. We're going to talk about all the details. And so, folks, if you haven't seen the final 2 episodes of Agatha All Along, it's your spoiler warning. Go watch them and come back and finish out the rest of our conversation. And again, we're going to talk about these together, and so we'll probably bounce around here, but I will start off and kick us off with kind of the premise of episode 8, in which, at this particular point, Teen, Billy, and Agatha are pretty much the only 2 witches left in the coven on the road at this particular time. And Lady Death reappears, played by Aubrey Plaza. And she's like, this kid is kind of an abomination. Like, what he's doing here, it's not good. He's disrupting the balance. what he wants from the road. It's a violation of what we believe in, and so she's just not happy. And now that we know that Arby Plaza is the character of death, she has the power to essentially in somebody's life whenever she so chooses. But Agatha, she basically is able to sort of make a plea with Rio, Lady Death, and say like, hey, well, I know you want me, you really want to remove me out of the equation, but because of everything that you said here, I will deliver Billy to you. I will essentially give him over to you so that you'll be satisfied, you'll be pleased, but then I can sort of walk away unscathed. And I think long before the episode is over, we kind of know that that's bullshit. And Agatha certainly has something up her sleeve, but maybe not, And we ultimately see throughout this episode that Lady Death returns. She comes to collect, and there's this huge battle that ensues between Agatha and Lady Death throughout this episode. It's probably the biggest set piece of this show thus far, just seeing them two throw down. And I think if you just naturally know the two characters, there's really no match here. Lady Death is Lady Death. And so Agatha's probably not going to be able to last too long. And she sort of recognizes that, like, I can't do this forever. But I thought it was a pretty impressive fight from just like a visual perspective, considering we've had a lot of issues with how some of this Disney Plus stuff works. Some of the CGI stuff has been very wonky and at times outright bad. But here, this was like one of the rare times when I looked at it, like, not only does this look pretty good, but also this is bringing in a new level of brutality that we don't often see from this side of the MCU. I think Rio and seeing Arby Plaza sort of just like have fun with being really evil and vicious and brutal against Agatha was a change of pace that I think we're just not quite used to seeing on these Disney Plus side of things. And so what did you think about just like that conflict that continued to develop between these two, knowing their previous history, obviously, but then how it all culminated in this big battle between those two?
Yeah, once Death is in the equation, once Rio was in the equation, and you see somebody going at odds with her, there really is only one outcome. And it's so interesting knowing that somebody's going to die. You just don't know exactly what that looks like. I thought it, again, I thought it looked pretty good too. I thought it was an impressive fight as well. We finally get to see some of that witch stuff come to fruition. In this show, we've been doing so many trials, we haven't really got down to the nitty gritty combat witch stuff. You know what I'm saying? So it was pleasant, I think, to see this go down the way it did. I was pretty okay with it. And to see. What I also really like about this whole thing going down is just thinking the whole time, what is Agatha going to do? like you said, she even says it herself, like, you can only fight death for so long. There's only really one outcome here. What's going to happen? But I think that kept the fight going for me. Like, yeah, what is she going to do? What's going to go on? So I thought that was a really cool conflict there. But overall, man, I enjoyed that part of the episode as well. I thought it was cool. And seeing Rio's powers or just the things that she does is like, I'm sure you're so much more terrifying even than what we've seen you do here in this episode. I can't even imagine. And I hope one day we can see her do something else, like something a little more crazy. But until then, man, that's all we get. But yeah, I hope to see something else soon.
Yeah, she can't throw out too much with the Disney Plus budget. She got to say that for the theatrical budget, because she could certainly do a lot more, as we know. But she was also, I think, kind of toying with Agatha and probably didn't even really want to kill her. I mean, maybe an aspect of her deep down kind of wants to, but I think that there's still that love and affection, right? That's still there, and so she's probably like, well, I don't really want to kill her, and so she was, I think, somewhat holding back, and so it actually, I think, from a character perspective, kind of makes sense. But also, like, another sort of important part about this was Billy sort of intervening, and even before like the fight kicks off, he's giving his power to Agatha, and historically we know and we've seen Agatha just like drain power out of witches and do it very selfishly in so far as the fact that it would kill the witch on the receiving end. And we questioned if she did that earlier in the season as well. And as Billy was doing it, I'm like, okay, this is going on for quite a while. Like, Billy, you probably got like 3 seconds left before your power is absolutely drained out of you. But ultimately Agatha stops before it becomes detrimental to him. And then I think in somewhat of a surprising stroke, she does actually, in order to save Billy and allow him to escape, she kisses Rio in essence to distract her, but then also to drain the life out of herself. and sort of act as like the sacrificial lamb, in this particular instance, to be able to give over a body to Rio, who's like, yeah, I'm coming to collect somebody. One of you aren't making it out of here. And Agatha sort of steps up and allows herself to be that. And Billy does escape after this. Did that moment surprise you? Were you sort of thrown off guard to see Agatha actually do something that I guess we would call heroic? Because historically, we've just seen she's never been that way. She's been a completely self-serving type of person, but she did this moment and did this move here. And based on everything we've seen, there's not necessarily a true ulterior motive here. Like, there's nothing to necessarily gain from her on this perspective, unless there's something out there that we don't quite know yet. But what was your reaction to seeing that moment?
Yeah, I was a little surprised. Part of me wish they named this episode "Kiss of Death." First of all, I mean,
oh, nice.
How could you not name it the Kiss of Death? I was like, wow, it's the Kiss of Death, literally. But what if there is still ulterior motive? Like, she said she took a calculated risk and she becomes a ghost, but she didn't die. Like, nope. Part of me is like, what if the calculated risk was she did take a little bit of Death's powers, right? Like, that's her thing. Like, she absorbs power. So maybe there wasn't completely nothing in it for Agatha, but maybe it was a twofer. One, she gets to save Billy, but also, even as she dies, she gets a little bit of power herself. Like, maybe she seems like she might be a little powerful, ghost, as we see by the end. So there might be something there, but I think we'll have to see. But I was surprised to kind of see it, I think, go down that way. I didn't think, like, a kiss definitely wasn't on my mind. You know what I mean? Like, I thought something else would happen. I didn't know she would go out in such a fashionable way. I was like, whoa, that's kind of a big statement to make and a crazy way to go out. But yeah, I was actually a little surprised by a lot of it. Again, not like you said, maybe something a little bit heroic, but at the end of the day, it still feels kind of in the middle, like more, she had a little bit of benefit in it all as well.
No, yeah, I think you're probably right. They haven't fully tapped into what that is, but conventional wisdom for just who we know her to be, there's probably something in it for her to do what she did here. Even though she's died or dead, like you said, it's not a true death in the sense of what we would traditionally think of it as. And so I think that there probably is something underneath that we just haven't been exposed to quite yet. But she always is going to, I think, figure out a way to service herself, even if she is trying to help out with somebody. In the case of Billy, who I think she sort of grew attached to. But also the reason I bring that up is, sort of directly tied to episode 9, because episode 9 actually takes us back to 1750, and we see Agatha's young son, Nicholas, who she ultimately gave birth to. But before she was able to even give birth, Death shows up and warns her, like, he's not going to make it out of this birth. It's going to basically be a miscarriage. But Agatha begs Death for more time. Like, please don't take him yet. Give me something. Give me anything. I'll take what you can give. And Death ultimately agrees, and we see basically for the next 6 years, they sort of speed run it, but Agatha raises Nicholas and becomes very close to him. They have this very, very tight-knit relationship. However, at his 6-year-old sort of, I guess, transition into that next birthday, that's when he ultimately does pass. We see that Death shows up. And so Agatha just never knew. It could have been 6 days, it could have been 6 weeks, but it turned out to be 6 years. And I do find that very much tied to maybe the sacrifice that she did for Billy, because Death basically presented her with a pretty similar situation. Like, hey, it's one or the other. Like, it's going to be you or him. And I think because Agatha already had that prior experience of losing her son, maybe she didn't want to go through something similar, or maybe this was her make good. And it's not a full make good, obviously, because she's fucked over multiple people in the show already, including Teen himself. But maybe that was her small way of just trying to redeem a very, very tiny ounce of some of the mistakes that she previously made, in her life. But it was a pretty powerful opening, I would say, for episode 9 to see this all unfold. And they had been hinting at it towards, the whole season about how she let her son die, or she might have been responsible for it. But to see how it actually played out, and to see that she begged Death to keep him around, and ultimately was able to raise him to at least the age of 6, but then lost him. What did you just make of that whole opening and how they played out that relationship between those two?
It's funny because when we first, get the hints of Nicholas Scratch and things like that, I think we were thinking, or at least I was thinking, something happened even darker than what we see actually unfold in the story, which is why I was so interested to kind of see that backstory of how Nicholas Scratch and Agatha, came along and how that whole thing went down. Because we're thinking like, dang, you sacrificed your kid for some power, or you did this and you did that. But really it was kind of way more natural than that. In some ways, it's like Agatha just happened to know death, right? Like there's another scenario where Agatha's not a witch, she doesn't know death, and she just like has a miscarriage right there. You know what I mean? And that's it. Versus her just being able to kind of, she knows death and she can see her and she's like, give me some more time. And it becomes something completely different. So I didn't expect, I think, to see that bargaining go down with death. I think in that way, I expected something a little darker rather than her just wanting to spend more time with her son. I think I threw her kind of to the pits a little bit more than I needed to. I was like, no, there's actually kind of a pretty innocent thing there. Like, of course you would want your son to last a little bit longer. But like you said, she didn't know when that death was coming. And so I guess to see, him pass so young was like, dang, death can really come and go. Like, what's her name? Lilia said, death comes for everyone. And that is like, that's just as dark as it gets. And it's actually very natural thing in my, that we were kind of watching in a way, but we could just kind of see the veil be pulled out now that we can see death. So it's kind of a cool idea, I think, to kind of mess with. It kind of reminds me of Death from Sandman. She kind of operates the same way, where you just kind of watch her like watching other people live until it's their time to go. Yeah. It feels very similar in that way. So it's really cool. But man, it still got dark. It's crazy. Like I expected it to be dark in one way, and then it still got dark. Like this song was created by her and her son to then go take power by witches. It's just like, wow, this got dark again. It started kind of light, and then it ended up being, just almost like what I thought it was going to be in the beginning. So yeah, it just looked different, but an interesting sequence for sure.
Yeah. Well, speaking of that, the big, I suppose, twist of this show comes immediately after we see Nicholas pass away and death ultimately take him. Now Agatha, with nothing holding her back, no love to really attach herself to, sort of moving in isolation at this point, and using the song to set up this centuries-old con that she runs on other witches. The road is completely made up bullshit. It's not a thing. Everything that we've seen up until this point, I mean, it's real to a certain extent as we find out that Billy is responsible for creating what the road is in this show. But truthfully, the idea of it, the experience that Agatha claims to have had with it, all of the lore and mythology, it's made up. It's not real. She used this to steal powers from other witches for centuries and centuries. She would lure them out into the middle of nowhere, have them sing this song and claim like, hey, what you ultimately desire, you have to walk the witch's road in order to obtain it. And this is how you can do it. And once the song would kick in and it wouldn't work, and she would look like, oh my God, it didn't work. I guess you guys are not worthy. All the witches would turn against her and try to kill Agatha. And she would use that moment to just absorb all of their power and just become stronger and stronger and stronger over the decades and the centuries that would pass. And it's an interesting swing, for sure. It recontextualizes the whole show.
Yeah.
Simultaneously, it also doubles down on how bad Agatha truly is as a person, as a villain. Yep. I mean, she lives up to that moniker, and it reinforces literally the title of the show, Agatha All Along. Like, this is not a person that's known for changing. This is not somebody who's all of a sudden going to become this different individual after going through some sort of like life-changing experience. That's not what we're here for. And so, what did you make of that? Because this can work or it cannot work. It recontextualizes everything, and I think Jack Schaefer is kind of known for doing this now across both WandaVision and this. And this is a pretty big thing to do in terms of just like this journey we've been following, these characters that we've become attached with. Some of them, a lot of them have perished, and you have to question like, well, what was it all for? Considering that this was all kind of a ruse to begin with.
It's one thing to kind of be, I think, thrown off the scent and for us to learn that Billy had created the Witch's Road. That's one thing. Like, okay. But to then find out that this song was one made by, of course, Agatha and her son, to then only be used to con witches out of their power and to kill them is a whole nother thing that I don't think I was ready for. And like you said, centuries long. To see like these different snippets, different decades of her just stealing witches' powers over and over and over is both dark and fitting for who Agatha is. It was literally Agatha all along, once again, which we thought. You could also argue it was Billy all along too, like the road, whatever. You could also it was Billy all
At
along.
least for this show, it was Billy all
Yeah, at
along.
least for the show. At least for the show. But that right there is, I like it because it's dark and it tells us that Agatha has never been shit and never will be shit. I like it. I was like, whoa, okay, let's do that. That to me, that's a real villainous thing to do. Like she even had her 6-year-old son like, Mom, do we have to kill witches? And she's like, well, if we don't, they're gonna kill us. Crazy way to think, and very deflective. But I think it does shine a light on what this villain was or is supposed to be to some degree. Like she just has never been good. This whole show, she's never been good. She's only been doing this for the bodies. Like there's never really been anything else but, like you said, self. She all she cared about was about herself. And yeah, it's a swing, but I was okay with it. I thought it was pretty dark.
So I do like the idea of what they went after here. It definitely caught me off guard and I did not see it coming. I like the idea. I do have a very, very small nitpick with it though. And this is me picking a nit for sure. I'm admitting that. But I find it hard to believe that word never spread or never traveled about Agatha doing this shit. Like,
yeah,
nobody talked about this. Of course, the witches that she ultimately killed could not talk about it, but those aren't the only witches. We're not supposed to believe that those are the only witches in existence at that particular time. Like, nobody went looking for these people. How did they die? They just went missing. Like, nobody knows this Agatha and can maybe say like, hey, you were the last person that this person that I know was with. Like, what's going on there? Like, you would imagine for somebody that's conning for centuries, like eventually a story would be told. There's so many, lores and mythologies about witches and histories and all these different texts. You would imagine that somebody would start to investigate and say like, yeah, something's going on here. Like there's something that's not adding up with the disappearance of all these witches. Again, of course, this would have to come within the witchcraft world, which is probably not that big, but I do imagine that there are more people involved than just the ones we saw perish. That's just a small gripe, though. I will admit that. But ultimately, the idea of it in and of itself, it's a very interesting and I do think a compelling one because one concern I had about this whole thing was like, well, are we just going to go this really cliched route of trying to redeem Agatha? And as I said earlier, they do small stuff where it's like, that was nice. That was a little selfless, but not a complete 180 in which I'm like, oh yeah, Agatha's now this rousing great hero that we get to root for. As you said, no, she's not shit. And like now that we've seen her murder a ton of innocent people, it's like, wow, you really are just terrible. You've just done so many terrible things, and I can't believe anything that you say. And I wish that fucking spell still existed that Wanda put on you. You should still be in fucking mayor of Easttown right now, living out that reality. But that's not to be the case. Now, what I will say on the other hand of it, Billy creating the road.
Yeah,
I'm not really here for that. I just don't. I don't get that. I don't really understand that. And what frustrated me more was how much responsibility he placed on himself for the deaths of Lilia, Alice, and Sharon. Like he felt so responsible for those deaths just because he created the road. And I'm like, dude, you're reaching here. Like you cannot accept that level of responsibility. Like, first of all, you didn't even know you created this bullshit. And secondly, everything that happened from there on was probably as a direct result of Agatha or some unpacked trauma that they all had to address individually within themselves. It was just crazy shit going on. You didn't create these circumstances. You didn't design this world. Like, you're not the fucking architect in the Matrix, my guy. So I just didn't understand why they placed so much focus on that. Like, why he felt so responsible for this thing. Maybe it's because he's a teenager and typically teens are harder on themselves at that age, but it felt like some real disingenuous Gen Z shit. Like, bro, you don't have that much power and responsibility to truly be responsible for the deaths of these people. Like, that was probably gonna happen regardless.
Yeah, to be honest, I was a little disappointed to hear that he created the role. Like, part of me was like, oh, this is a cool thing in this witch mythology we're gonna get. But I also felt a little cheated a little bit. Even I was bamboozled too by Agatha and Billy here. I'm like, dang, the road's not a real thing. It kind of sucked for me a little bit, but because there was so much, it almost Like if I was to rewatch it, it would take away from it for me. Like it'd be like, dang, this is I don't know. Like
Yeah,
I
you see
was
it all
just
differently at that point,
you see it all differently, and not in like a good way, right? Not in like a rewatch that you're like, oh no, that only makes it even better. Like we got with Lilia, it's like, oh, that recontextualizes everything. But now it's like, oh, that's why Rio just tearing down walls and walking through shit because it's just Billy doing this stuff. And so, yeah, I feel a little cheated by that. But you know, also to your point, there was so much happening in there that, like you said, Billy blamed for it. I think one of the only reasons they said, you know what, let's make Billy be the creator of the role. They wanted to give us a reason to be like, oh, he's his mom's son. Like, oh, his mom created this whole thing. And they want us to be like, oh, Billy also created this whole thing. And I think there was other ways to go about it to just get us to we knew he's tied to Wanda, but you know, he could have created aspects of the road and these other things about the road. He had to create like the whole thing. I thought that was a pretty big swing. I can't lie to you. And so yeah, it just took away from it a little bit for me. I was hoping now that we're such in a cool world of weirdness and magic, and sometimes it's like, no, that's okay for that thing to be real. You know what I'm saying? Like, let's just make that thing real. We got Doctor Strange out here. Who the hell knows where he's at right now? You know what I'm saying? So it was a part of me that was hoping the road was a real thing.
Yeah. The biggest, I think the biggest benefit from it is the idea, and we kind of see it in the scene in which the road does get opened up and created. Agatha is like, wait, what? Like this worked? This is real? Like
Yeah.
even in that moment, what I do like is that she didn't anticipate it and she didn't know really what was happening. And so everything after that was like basically improv. I do like that idea because she has to become and morph into an even more cunning and clever person to like adapt to the changing circumstances. But yeah, as we've pointed out, you know, a couple of times here, like the actual creation of it being, you know, at the hands of Billy, it's just like, I just don't know if I'm really with that. But to just quickly go back to episode 8, we actually did get like a full reveal of Billy's costume as Wiccan, like really for the first time, head to toe he had the costume. Just quickly, what did you think about the look of him once he popped up to sort of save Agatha in that battle that she had with Rio?
It was fine. It was fine. I could tell I like the colors. I think the colors look good. But I can tell, like, again, I don't know exactly where they're going here, but you just know, like, if y'all are going full young Avengers here, like, you know what I'm saying? Like, this guy's clearly going to be a part of whatever team is supposed to come out of this. And it's fine. I think his mom still looks better. That's the thing. I'm like, dang, you look fine, but you don't look like your mom, I guess. I think the best part of his garb to me is the crown. The crown looks really good to me. And I do like the red garb, but the rest of it, the actual fit itself, is just it's fine. Yeah, it's fine. The colors are the best part to me, I think.
Yeah, when I first saw it, I was like, "Ooh, okay, okay," and then it just like settled in, like, okay, I see what they're kind of going for, and it's cool. But it was a pretty quick view as well. Like we didn't see a ton of it, and he doesn't do a ton in that particular scene as well. And so, if they do go somewhere with this like Young Avengers thing, which I have no faith that they will at this point, but there's naturally an upgrade waiting for him.
Exactly.
If it becomes a theatrical thing, there's an upgrade waiting for him. I don't know about Disney Plus, but that movie budget money will certainly add more levels and layers to it. So, you know, after he blames himself, you know, Agatha's like, no, that's bullshit. Don't blame yourself. I was already going to kill them. Like, and Jen is still alive. Like, Jen did make it out and escape the road. She found out that Agatha had basically sort of bound her and took away her powers this whole time, which was kind of a small indication that, you know, Agatha was always up to like some bullshit and that she wasn't really responsible for what was going on there. But she tried to undermine everybody along the way. But then Billy returns to Westview. He tries to banish Agatha. Agatha's like, no. And she's a ghost now, as we've pointed out. She's like fully ghost because she's like died, quote unquote. But once he tries to banish her, Agatha's like, no, I'm not doing that because then I would have to face my son. I would have to face Nicholas in the afterlife. And I'm not ready to do that. And so Billy is like, okay, well, it's fine. You can come with me. And basically they're going to set out to go find Tommy, Billy's brother. But I do want to talk about that moment of Agatha choosing to not fully transition over into the afterlife. Because again, that's another big choice where a character has died, very loosely using that, but is still around, still exists very much within the context of the show. We're going to see her again, likely. But the choice of her not confronting that and not facing that. What do you think about that specifically? Because I think it says a lot about her character and where she's at, probably in good and bad ways. I think you can look at it from a numerous amount of perspectives, but it is a choice, you know, because on one hand, it prevents her from transitioning and keeps her relatively alive, so to say, within the context of this series and anything moving forward. But also from a character perspective, it does kind of speak to a more emotional level that we don't typically see out of Agatha. It touches on some emotional beats that we don't really get to see them address. So what did you just make of her deciding like she's not ready for that moment in her life quite yet?
Yeah, you know, very interesting. And I think there's a lot of things that they can do with it. Like you said, she's not completely gone, and now she kind of serves as Billy's, I don't even know what they are, partner. in I don't
weird deranged auntie type shit.
Mother, yeah, I don't know what the demon godmother, witchy godmother. I have no idea, but it's like part of me likes the idea of keeping her around in order to get us to move in other spaces that we haven't gotten to. Like, we don't know any ghosts in MCU for real, except, well, there's a whole character named Ghost. We don't count her. She's not an actual ghost, but yeah, we don't know any other ghosts in the MCU. And I think they might be keeping her around for a reason, though, too. Part of me is like, y'all have an idea for her. It's just something about the way they did it and the way they ended that's like, it felt too, I don't know, like, oh, y'all got something to do with these characters, like y'all about to go do something with them. I don't know what that is. Of course, Vision coming out soon and whatever else.
Well, it's very open-ended. It's not a conclusive ending. Yeah,
it's very open-ending. Like, y'all about to move them somewhere, and so I think she will have a purpose. I think it just depends on what that purpose is going to end up being. I think for now it's like, okay, I'm okay with it, but don't waste the opportunity. And I also like the idea of like Rio doesn't like ghosts, and that's exactly what Agatha became, is a ghost. So there is something there, but I we'll have to see how it plays out. But part of me also does agree, like, that she hasn't completely absolved herself from all the things she wants to do. Like you said, her character choice is like, I kind of get it. Like, the way Agatha lives and breathes, she's always been a survivor. She never wants to die. She never wants to move on from anything. I can tell she hasn't moved on from still anything that's happening or that was happening in her normal life. So keeping her around is like, I could tell it's both the money play and I could see it from a story play too, at least a little bit.
Yeah, this bothered me. I didn't like this ending. I feel like the ghost shit, like,
yeah,
really? Like, that's how we're gonna keep her around. Fucking just keep her alive or fucking kill her. Like, just pick. Just pick. I just don't like. I mean, this has always been the issue within, you know, any sort of like Marvel or comic book storytelling in general. I mean, you can do this with anybody. You can take this type of route with anybody. Like, what is real death? What is like permanent death? But now leaning into the idea that she can just like live in this lingo and be a ghost because she has the agency to choose to say, I don't want to go to the afterlife. And conveniently, Rio doesn't like ghosts. Well, fucking write it the other way. Rio loves ghosts, so get the fuck over here. Like, you don't have to take that route. And it just feels like an utter convenience to me, and a way to obviously keep her around to do something else with her, whether it's another season or an appearance in another show. And I don't know. I'm just not really here for that. That's just like one of those things where it's like, it just feels very cheap. And
yeah,
I mean, we just, you know, we spin this circle, but so many times, and we see this happen quite often. I mean, it's literally what happened with even Vision and WandaVision. Like, they didn't kill anybody in WandaVision. Everybody just gets a spinoff. Like, oh no, Vision's not dead. He's just white now, and he runs away. Oh no, Agatha's not dead now. She's just a ghost, and she runs away. It's like, come on, guys. Like, come on. I just wasn't here for it. Now, her not wanting to face Nicholas, I kind of wanted to see that happen. Like, deep down, it's like, I want to see that go down. Like, face that fear. But that also just might be asking for a character that we have not grown and evolved into yet. Like, Agatha is not that person yet. And I can appreciate maybe having a little bit more patience with that type of development. Whereas, same thing with Loki. There were certain things that Loki was not ready for. The Loki that we saw at the end of season 2 and the sacrifice that he made, we couldn't do that in Age of Ultron or Infinity War,
Right.
or really even
Mhm.
season 1, there were certain things that had to
Mhm.
happen for him to get to that place. And so I can appreciate that we might have to take that time to do that for Agatha. I just wish they didn't kill her. Just keep
Yeah.
her and just figure out a way to like have that journey continue. Because now
Mhm.
like her wandering around as an older looking ghost is just like, I don't know, it's just kind of strange to me. But as we wrap up here, any last thoughts, takeaways about Agatha all along, how the entire show landed for you now that we have the final 9 episodes in totality? And ultimately, where does it rank for you in terms of the Marvel live action show specifically? So not including like What If or X-Men 97, but when you talk about live actions, the Hawkeyes, the Lokis, the WandaVisions, of course, where would you ultimately place Agatha all along against those other Marvel live action TV shows that we've gotten?
Yeah. Man, before I get into all that, Jen is still alive. Very important. I think they're going to use her at some point. That's probably one loose end they have that I'm like, oh yeah, y'all might do something with her. She is like Ghost Rider's cousin. I don't think they'll do anything with that, but just a cool fun fact. But she is a witch in the world who is alive and has flown away. I think we will see Jen again at some point. You know, Marvel. I don't think she just left into the air for no reason outside of Westview. Overall, this show, I love the experiment that was created. Jack Schaefer, I think, is, you can tell, had a really good time making this show, using a lot of the same, I think, tricks from WandaVision, and a lot of the same also mystique, and in some ways some of the same charisma from WandaVision, and translated it into what Agatha all along would look like. I don't think everything landed as poised and as smoothly as it did in WandaVision by the end, but for me, the endings are very similar, where I have to side eye a lot of things, and I'm like, I don't know how I feel about that ending. I think I was looking for something else. And yeah, in that way, those two shows feel very similar. I love what they did with the fact that this show was surrendered around Halloween. It was very witchy. They kept Wanda very villainous by the end of it all. Again, but and I think, overall, if they decide to use, Jack Schaefer does another show that is Disney Plus show, I think very well equipped to do so. But it just depends on what show that would be and what that looks like. But overall, Agatha all along, it was fine. I In my list, it ranks, let me see, I got Agatha all along at like the sixth spot, I think, sixth or seventh spot. It lingers in the realm of like Moon Knight and Hawkeye for me, on how those shows operate. Again, I liked a lot about it. Just there's certain things I needed to land. I wished more episodes felt like the episode with Lilia. I wish more episodes feel like even episode 1 or episode like, and we just didn't get that throughout the entire series. So yeah.
So Agatha all along, it was okay. Most of these Marvel TV shows are just like okay, except for like the bottom half, which are just not good. But
Ooh, yeah.
these are all just like really okay. And this kind of continues that. I know a lot of people love this show, and I'm happy for them. I'm really happy for them that a lot of people love the show. I'm not there. I still think that these are hitting a certain ceiling in terms of like quality from what I expect out of TV and from what I want. But there are things and highlights that I really liked, that I've certainly pointed at throughout these weekly reviews of this series. And I do think that at least within like the first 6 episodes, maybe even 7, it did get better as it went along. I started to like it more and more and more and more and more. And then the final 2 episodes, not terrible, not the worst finales that we've gotten out of all the live action stuff, but again, sort of an uneven experience that just left my head sort of scratching and just like thinking like, oh, we're kind of falling into the same Marvel trappings that we see in a lot of these projects, but it was cool. Final rankings, it's 4th actually out of the 10 shows that we've gotten. So my first favorite obviously is Loki, followed by WandaVision. Ms. Marvel is 3rd still, kind of for me, and then I would have Agatha all along right after that. And then following Agatha is She-Hulk and Hawkeye and Moon Knight, so on and so forth. But yeah, 10 shows is it's quite a lot. But this does fall, I guess, on the higher end because it does do more things successfully. Even though I think that the show is just like pretty average, it does a lot more stuff successfully in terms of what we have talked about a lot with these Marvel shows. Run times, episode counts, like those weren't really things I had gripes with. I think that the episode count was great. The lengths of each episode worked pretty well for me. Probably could have used a few minutes here and there, but it wasn't like an overwhelming gripe that I've had with other shows. And the characters here are really, really strong individually and in isolation. These are some of the best characters that I think we've gotten in TV, more so than a lot of these other shows. And that's actually like a real, real big highlight for me. And so I think ultimately Agatha, it'll enjoy its place as being one of the better experiments that they've done on the Marvel Disney Plus side of things. And hopefully as we transition into this new era, I suppose, that we're going to see, it only goes up from here, because the next big live action show that we're going to get, I believe, is Daredevil. I think that's the next one. We have a few animated stuff coming out in between, but Daredevil is like the next big live action one, which, that just has to be great. And so we will ultimately see. But folks, those are all of our thoughts on Marvel Studios' Agatha All Along. If you've checked out these final 2 episodes and checked out the entire season, hit us up and let us know what you think.